All right, so welcome everybody to Spiritual Experiencers. And my name is Catherine. I'm so happy today because we have a wonderful guest speaker, and his name is Peter Alessandria. And he's going to be sharing with us tonight about his book called Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. And so we are all so happy to have Peter here with us tonight. And he can share about what led up to this book and maybe some tips that he has in the book. And yeah, and you can get the book on Amazon. And is there any other place? There it is. All right. I'm gonna spotlight you, so then you can show it, okay, Peter?
Okay.
Is there any other place they can get it? Is it your website also?
Yeah, if you go to the website, bebiggertoday.com, Bebigger today, all one word.com.
Okay. All right.
Available as an audiobook, as Kindle, and as a paperback.
Great. All right. Well, welcome, Peter. We're so happy to have you here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Catherine. It's good to be back to see everybody. I was here a few weeks ago talking about my film, which I will allude to because that's a big part of me being bigger than I think I am. Let me just introduce myself briefly, tell you a little bit about where I come from and where I think I'm going. I do want to just start out by saying I'm not an experiencer per se. I'm not a contactee that I know of. Um, I'm a seeker, and I've been seeking for like 30 years. So I guess I'm a slow learner, or I don't know what you call it, but it's taken me a while to get it. And what I'm getting is that there's more to life than what appears to the eye. We're more than we think we are as individuals and as a collective. There's a lot more going on here in this physical experience than most of us are aware of, although more and more people are becoming more aware of that. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is my own opinion. It's my own, based on my experiences, as limited as they may be. I'm not here to change anybody's mind about anything. Just presenting my own experience, my own point of view on things. And as they always say in 12-step programs that I'm very familiar with, take what you like and leave the rest. So I started out, I grew up in the East Coast, originally from the New York City area. I went to college and grad school in upstate New York. I actually went to law school and got my MBA in Buffalo, New York. And after 4 years in Buffalo, I bought a one-way plane ticket for Los Angeles because I wanted to get involved in the film business. And so I moved my whole life out there, and my goal, working as an attorney, my goal was to get involved in the entertainment business, film and TV, and I eventually did that. And one of the byproducts of that was that I fell in love with the creative process. Up until that point, I didn't really know much about filmmaking and what would later become for me photography. And so one of the perks of the job being an entertainment lawyer was I got to go on the sets while they were making the films. And this was back in the early 90s. It was kind of before Entertainment Tonight and all the TV shows that kind of was showing the behind the scenes of what goes on a movie set. And I never forget the first time I walked on a movie set, I was just so blown away by the whole production, the lights, the camera, the action, and all of that. And eventually became an amateur filmmaker and photographer, amateur photographer. So I didn't quit my day job as an attorney, but I used my spare time to learn filmmaking and photography, basically. What was happening around this time, again, this was the early to mid 90s. The independent film world was coming online. So like the Sundance Film Festival was becoming popular. And for the first time, there was a real alternative to the commercial studio productions. And being young and in Hollywood, I started hanging out with a lot of these independent filmmakers. And eventually I just got the bug, and I wanted to learn for myself, what that whole process was like. The other thing that was happening at that time, which seems like was a big deal then, it's nothing now, but back then it was a really big deal, was that digital video was coming out. So up until that point, films were actually filmed on film. And it was a whole process. You had to have the film developed, you had to expose it properly, and it was very cumbersome to work with. Now we take it for granted. We all have our phones with us, and so we can do whatever we want in terms of, creating visual imagery and all that. But back then, that was a big deal. So all of a sudden, you can make a movie on your laptop. And so I kind of just dove into that. My nights and weekends were spent learning the craft of filmmaking and photography. And then in 2008, 2009, in the wake of the global financial crisis, I literally lost my law practice in a matter of months. And I spent a bunch of time trying to resurrect that. I even started applying for jobs at the studios and with law firms. And basically, I went from a really nice six-figure income and a nice life to basically nothing in terms of income in a few months. And I came to a crossroads. And I had been so the other big thing about moving to California was I got involved with a lot of the kind of personal development, spiritual growth stuff that was happening, the human potential movement, and started doing all kinds of workshops and retreats and reading books. And just being very drawn to this idea that there's something bigger going on here, right? And that we're not who we think we are. And I also got involved in a couple of 12-step programs, been sober for almost 30 years now. And it was a kind of a combination of all of that steered my life in a direction where when it came to that time to change careers, I decided to go for it. I decided that I was I read a book called Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. And I believed that, and so I took a chance and I decided to leave the law behind. At the same time, I moved back to the East Coast. My parents were getting older, and I don't have any kids of my own, but my sisters started having kids. So I was constantly flying back and forth anyway. So I moved my life to the East Coast. I left the law behind. I left Hollywood behind. I'm about an hour from New York City now, and I'm going to start this career as a photographer, professional photographer and filmmaker. Mind you, I've never taken a photography class. I've never taken a filmmaking class. Completely self-taught. And for almost 3 years, nothing happened. I had set up some websites, and I told some friends that I wanted to start this new career, launch this new career. And nothing was happening. And at first, I had all these great excuses, had all these great reasons why nothing was happening. The economy was still kind of rough. I never went to school for art, photography, filmmaking. I never even took an art appreciation class in college. I mean, I was economics, law, and business. At one point, I was even convinced it was because I didn't have the latest and greatest camera equipment. But eventually I realized that, the problem wasn't out there, the problem was in here. And it turned out that I had a very negative self-image when it came to being a creative person. I was terrified to put myself out there. I was terrified of rejection, of criticism. It got to the point where I couldn't even post photos on Facebook, on social media. Now, the blessing and the curse of that time was I eventually started to run out of money. And had saved up a lot of money as a lawyer, and now the money was, after almost 3 years, the money was almost gone. And I realized that it was time to put up or shut up, as they say. And I started to do all the things that I had been studying for years, the law of attraction stuff, the affirmations, visualizations, doing the mental preparatory work to do what I eventually needed to do, which was take action. It's one thing to sit around and visualize being a successful filmmaker or photographer. It's another thing to actually put yourself out there, look for work, look for clients, produce work, and do all the things that a successful person, creative person does. So slowly but surely, I really started to work on my mindset, to work on basically who I thought I was. And I realized that the most important question we can ask ourselves is, who am I? Or the way I say it is, who do you think you are? Because whoever we think we are is exactly who we're going to end up being in life. And as I began to look closer, I began to see that I had all these negative programs, these negative thoughts and beliefs about myself. That's what was holding me back. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't the lack of a formal education. It wasn't even my cameras or my lenses. It was the mindset. It was how I saw myself. And it was these negative self-image that I had. as a result of my life experiences, and in particular, my childhood. I had a very critical upbringing. There's a lot of criticism, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blame, and I internalized a lot of that, and I didn't even know that that's what was running my life. I'm now in my 40s, my late 40s, and my life is still being run by the beliefs and conclusions of a 5-year-old. So as I began to look at all of this, I began to shift that consciously and deliberately, create a new self-image, work with affirmations, work with a vision board, work with visualizations. I found an action partner, and I started to take all the actions that I was afraid to take, including things like cold calling. So part of my plan to work as a photographer was to have a commercial photography business that included product photography for e-commerce websites, as well as executive portraits and headshots. So I started cold calling all the local businesses. Eventually, I cold called every accounting firm, every law firm, every insurance agency, most of the offices in the state of New Jersey, pitching my headshot and portrait photography for their websites. My tagline for the law firms was, "I used to be a lawyer, now I shoot them." Occasionally, the lawyers would laugh. The executive assistants loved that one. So I was starting to do things like cold calling, and what I realized was after 2 years of cold calling, I realized one day, nobody's ever hung up on me. In fact, everybody was really nice to me. And I guess they must have felt bad for me, because in a lot of cases, if they weren't interested, they gave me the number of a friend or another company I could call. They were trying to help me. And I realized that the problem wasn't out there. Again, the problem wasn't here. And because before, during, and after every one of those phone calls, I would beat myself up. I would say, "Who do you think you are? Nobody's going to want to hire you. You don't know what you're doing. Your work sucks." All the negative self-talk. And that's what was creating the fear. And fear equals resistance. And resistance means that I don't get off the couch. So eventually, I really got that, it was nobody else's criticism of me that was a problem. It was always and only my own criticism of myself. So one of the things I talk about in my book is I had to go from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. I just had to learn how to be nice to myself when things didn't work out, when I didn't do what I thought I was supposed to do. I could see it was the self-loathing, the self-criticism, the self-rejection that was in my way, that was holding me back. So I had a plan, I had a vision, I realized the things I wanted to do, and by undoing all that negative self-talk, I suddenly had the energy to do those things. The resistance began to fall away. And within a few years, I went from somebody who never won an award for anything in my life to somebody who's won more than 75 awards for my photography. I went from somebody, again, who was afraid to post photos on Facebook to somebody whose work has been published in newspapers and magazines around the world. Millions of people have seen my work. And I went from somebody who was, never thought it was possible to have a career that I was really passionate about to, the last 15 years, I've traveled the world as a professional photographer and filmmaker. And the only thing that changed was how I saw myself, who I thought I was. Now, so what happened was I just started doing all this cool stuff, being published. The other thing was entering shows and exhibitions, getting my photos in the newspapers, all that stuff. It took a lot of effort. And what I say to people is, for every one of those awards, there was at least 5, maybe 10 failures, rejections, and disappointments. So the other thing I learned that I had to learn was how to handle failures, rejections, and disappointments. Because in the past, if things didn't work out, I would take it personally, or I would take it as some kind of an affirmation that I was not good enough, or they didn't like me, or it wasn't going to work out. And I had to learn to push through that and to do it, to be persistent, to be, and the best example of that was getting my photos in the newspaper. So I live about an hour from New York City, and a lot of my fine art photography is pictures of New York City, especially at night. And I've done a whole series of photos that have like the full moon over the different landmarks in New York City. Maybe you guys have seen some of these photos. Everybody's doing them now, but this was, 10, 12 years ago. There was only a handful of us who were doing this. And we would track the trajectory of the moon and align it with the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty. And we were creating some really cool photos, really, breathtaking photos that had really never been seen before. And so I had this whole collection of images, and I wanted to get them published in the paper. So I just cold called the biggest newspaper here in New York City. And I got the receptionist on the phone, and I said, I want to speak to somebody in the photo department. She put me through. And then somebody picked up the phone in the photo department. It was one of the photo editors. And I was surprised, but I went with it, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm a local photographer, and I have some really great photos of New York City, and I'd like to send them to you. Maybe you guys want to publish them. So she was very nice. She said, sure, that would be great. She gave me her email address and said, yes, send me whatever you got. For almost 10 months, I sent this person photos. Probably 4 or 5 times a month, I would send a handful of photos. Never heard back. I didn't even know if I had the right email address. I didn't know if she was getting them. And I came to a point, guys, where I said, am I going to keep doing this? Am I just fooling myself? Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I'm not as good as, these other photographers or whatever. And there came a moment, and I just said, you know what? I can't give up on myself again. I can't do that. I don't want to be that person anymore. And I said, I'm just going to continue sending photos until she tells me to stop, or they want to publish them. Within a week, I get a phone call from her. I didn't even recognize the number. I thought it was like a spam call. She's like, oh, we love that photo you sent in last week. We want to run it in the paper on Sunday. I was like, great, awesome. She says, how much do you charge? It's like, oh, crap. I didn't know. I had no idea what, I wasn't even expecting to get paid. We negotiated a rate. They ran the photo in the paper, and it was just this really important moment for me, because it was proof that I'm the only one who dictates how my life goes, right? It's like I'm the one who gets in my own way. And if I do that consistently, my life is going to be really small and going to be really unpleasant, and I'm going to miss out on a lot of things. And so by not giving up on myself, by believing in myself. Now, what I realized very quickly is that, especially in the world of art, filmmaking, photography, it's all so subjective. I mean, there's a certain level of skill or talent, and sensibility and all that. But beyond that, it's so subjective. So it's not about you have to be better than anybody else to have a successful career as an artist. You can just be you. You can just do what speaks to you. You can do what represents or expresses you. And so it was very eye-opening for me, because for a long time, I thought, well, you have to be the best if you want to have a successful career. And maybe that's not exactly true, because what's best, as I just said, in the world of art. And then beyond that, I just realized that, I have to be in my own corner. I have to be my own biggest cheerleader. I have to be my own biggest supporter. I can't expect anybody else to do that for me. Now, I'm at this point, I'm in my 50s. It's kind of a revelation, but I guess it's better late than never in terms of understanding this kind of thing. And I've gone on now to have, as I said, I've traveled the world. I became an official photographer for one of the biggest fireworks performance companies in the world. And again, it was the same thing. I just said, you know what? I'm going to just run on the assumption that my work is as good as anybody else's. And so I sent some photos to the website of the company that was doing these performances. And this was another thing. Like 20 minutes later, I get an email back from the president of the company, and he's like, I want you on my team, And I was like, I was hoping maybe they'd put one of the photos on their Instagram page, and now he wants to employ me, And again, the only thing was the mindset, right, guys? I didn't talk myself out of it. I didn't give up on myself. And that's a big deal. So I am where I am today because of that, and I've really adopted that mentality and learning how to. And again, not everything has worked out. As I said, every one of those 75 awards, that there have been at least 5 and probably 10 failures, rejections, and disappointments. And I realized that's just the way the world works. That's just the way the game is played. But you got to be in the game to win it, right? The other thing I did is I started aligning myself with other photographers. For most of my early career, I thought they were the competition, right? And it was dog eat dog, and it was like I had this attitude where their success, their gain was my loss. But I realized very quickly that that was very limited thinking, and that was based on this idea that I'm not good enough, that I have to fight for everything that I'm going to get in life. And what happened very quickly was, by supporting other photographers, by aligning with other photographers, all kinds of stuff started coming my way, all kinds of opportunities, including a book deal, not this book, but a photo book that I did. I got an offer from a publisher to do a New York City photo book. And I thought, and that came through another photographer who I knew. And I thought, it's important, I wanted to kind of give back. So I found 6 other photographers that I was friends with from Instagram. And I said to the publisher, I said, I don't want it to be my book. I want to do the book with these 6 other people, because I wanted to give them a chance to shine as well. So we did this photo book together, and it was fabulous because we're all New York City photographers. So we all have photos of the Empire State Building. We all have photos of the Statue of Liberty, but everyone has their own take on it. And so everybody's photos are different. So it was really, it was a great experience. And it was more evidence to me that it's not about competition, it's about cooperation. It's not about me versus the world. It's about, there's plenty for all of us. So the way the book came about is in 2019. So what was happening was, people were saying, people saw me winning awards and being published and flying to Dubai and, all around the world to take photos. And people started asking me to speak, kind of like this, at different photography groups, schools, high schools, actually a college in South America. They actually flew me to South America, and I ended up speaking at 3 universities to hundreds of college students about pursuing their dreams in life and what it takes to have the life that we want. The subtitle of the book is Overcoming Our Self-Imposed Limits to Have the Life We Want. Most of them just really wanted to know what it was like to live in New York City. But it was this great opportunity for me to begin to help others by sharing my story. And a bunch of them said, well, you got to write a book, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, one day I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a book about, all the techniques that I used and all the things that I did to really change my life. I mean, I really went from, being terrified to be seen as a creative person to, it's complete. I've had exhibitions, art galleries. My work has been published and posted in the lobby of the Empire State Building as one of the finalists. And I've been a finalist in the Empire State Building photo contest for like 6 years in a row. So people are seeing my work. And I thought, yeah, one day I'm going to write a book. I was just too busy being a photographer and a filmmaker to actually sit down and write a book. 2019, I go to California, I go back to LA. First time I've been out there actually since I moved. I did a photo shoot for a client in Los Angeles, and then I was going to go up to Yosemite. So part of my business is fine art photography, landscapes, cityscapes, and I had never photographed Yosemite, even when I lived in California. So that was the plan. I'm driving up there after the photo shoot in LA went great. I'm driving up there, and I'm just about to get to the park. I'm actually at the visitor center. I'm driving. I had to rent a car. I got to find a bathroom, and I get out of the car. I've been in the car for like 4 hours. Get out of the car. It was the middle of the day, but somehow I tripped. There was like a curb that was covered by these vending machines. I didn't actually fall, but I caught my right leg on this curb, and I tore my calf muscle. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever torn a muscle, and especially a calf muscle, it is the most painful. I mean, it was horrible, right? And I was immediately rendered lame. I couldn't put any weight on my right foot. couldn't walk, and it was this moment of, oh my God, what just happened, and the pain. But in that moment, guys, I heard very clearly in my head, now you can write your book. Now, the book was the last thing on my mind in that moment, right? I hadn't thought about it for months. And I didn't know, and then the voice went, and I haven't heard that voice since, right? Today, knowing what I know, and I'll talk about where I am today, but knowing what I know, I would say that was a guide. You know, they were trying to get my attention. And that night, I made it. I knew what the injury was. I didn't go to the hospital because I had had the same injury in my left leg about 5 years earlier. I knew we were in the middle of nowhere. The nearest hospital was like 40 miles away. So I made it, somehow I made it to the hotel. The clerk behind the counter had a pair of crutches, which is exactly what I needed. I had just stocked up on all my groceries, so I had enough food for the whole week. And I checked into the hotel room, and that night I sat down and I started writing the book. And I didn't stop until it was finished almost 9 months later. Now it took a little longer than that, but and what I and it was a very powerful experience for me, you know, to really put everything on paper and to love myself through that experience, because I didn't consider myself a writer and all this other stuff. Eventually, what happened was, so it's 2019. This was February of 2019. By the end of the year of 2019, I'm back on my feet, literally and figuratively. And I'm getting ready to go back to working because I couldn't work that whole time. And then 2020 hits, and a couple months later, we're back stuck with the pandemic. But what had happened was, while I was working on the book and healing my leg, I read a novel by William Buhlman. Some of you may know William. He writes about out-of-body experiences. He was one of the lead instructors at the Monroe Institute for years. And he wrote a bunch of nonfiction books on how to have an out-of-body experience. But he also wrote a novel. And the novel was called Adventures in the Afterlife. And so I read that while I was convalescing and writing my book. And I read it, and I knew a little bit about the near-death experiences. You know, I knew a little bit about what people talked about in terms of the afterlife, but I had never really given it. You know, I was still trying to deal with this life. I couldn't even think about, you know, what comes next, right? So I'm trying to you know, heal, you know, whatever I needed to heal to make this life better. But reading that book, it really got me thinking about the afterlife. Now, it was also really well written, and I thought this has to be made into a film. So I ended up reaching out to William, and I got in touch with him, and we struck up a relationship. And I told him, you know, I thought this should be a film, and he agreed, but he didn't want to write it, the screenplay. And I was still working on my book. And I knew that if I got sidetracked with this other project, my book wouldn't get done. So I finished my book, and then I got back to him and I said, you know, basically what happened was I optioned the book, the novel from him to turn it into a film. I paid him, we did a contract, I paid him for the option, and now I'm writing a screenplay based on the book. And as part of the research for that screenplay, I start watching, and now we're in the pandemic, so we're all home watching YouTube. And I started watching all these NDE videos, right, with all these experiencers. And it was ostensibly research for the film. But what I started doing was reaching out to some of the people that I was seeing the interviews with. And some of them got back to me, and we did like a Zoom thing like this, and I introduced myself, and I told them what I was doing. And I started forming relationships with some of these people. And then one day, I was going to do a Zoom. Some of you guys may know Christian Sundberg. Christian is a pre-birth experiencer, great guy. I had a Zoom set up with him. I'd seen his interview on one of the podcasts. And I'm waiting for breakfast. I'm waiting for the toast to pop, and the toast pops out of the toaster, and this idea pops into my head. And the idea is you got to do a documentary about the near-death experience. And it was so clear, you know, it was just like, oh, of course, you know. And The screenplay was finished at that point, but I couldn't get anybody to read it. It was just one kind of brick wall after another, and I realized I needed to put that aside because I was too putting too much effort into it. And so I started asking people if they wanted to be in a documentary about, the near-death experience. Now, one of the things I knew right away was I didn't want to sensationalize or exploit anybody's story, all right? And in particular, I love, there's so much information out there now. There's so many great interviews. There's so many great interviewers. There's so many great podcasts that cover the space. I acknowledge every one of them. They're great. They're brilliant at what they do. But it was really important to me to not spend to not spend a lot of time on the car accident or the botched surgery or the cancer or the coma, whatever it was that took them out. And I went so far as to say, you know what? I'm not even going to do that. Instead, I'm going to come up with a list of questions that I think everybody has about the afterlife. And I came up with this list of 35 questions. And you can see them. So to find out more about the film I'm talking about, the documentary, it's called Every Soul Knows: The Joy of Remembering Who We Really Are. The website is 3 words, everysoulknows.com. And you can see those 35 questions on the website. Questions like, what is the soul? What's the soul's relation to source/God? What is karma? Is there such a thing as hell? Do we have soul contracts or agreements? Do we have soul families? All these questions. And I started interviewing people. And then the other thing was I didn't want to do webcams. I wanted to do a higher end kind of production. So that meant putting everybody in front of the camera, being in the same room. And I also decided to film on green screen. You can see the setup behind me. That's actually the set that I've been using for almost 2 years now. And I started on this journey. And there was a bunch of local people here. In addition to NDEers, I was interviewing channels, psychics, and mediums. So there was a bunch of local people. Then I hooked up with IANS, some of you may know Angela Harris from IANS. She was very helpful in helping me kind of find people for the film. And then eventually I went to the conference in DC in 2023. I rented a hotel suite there, and I did like 15 interviews in 4 days. I just had people, they just came one after another. And so this documentary was kind of gaining a life of its own, just kind of moving. And to date, I've interviewed over 60 people from all over the world. I've had people come from all over the US, Canada. I've got somebody coming in from England in a couple of weeks. One woman even came from Bali. And they're all coming at their own expense. I'm paying a small appearance fee, but they have to pay their own travel. And I've ended up interviewing some of the more well-known people in the space. People who've written New York Times bestsellers. It was also important to me, kind of like with my photography book. It was important for me. I'm having a moment of deja vu right now. It was important for me to give new people a chance. So about half the people in the film you've never seen before, and I wanted to give them a chance to shine, to tell their story. And so the first 40 people, I asked these questions, these 35 questions. But then about a year ago, I realized, there is value in telling the stories. I had all these NDEers, and I didn't let any of them tell their story, and a lot of them were like, well, when do I tell my story? And I'm like, we're not doing stories. And then I realized there is value in the story. So I kind of re-embarked on this. And since then, I've been doing a lot of first-person accounts of their NDE experience. Again, we're not spending, like Jeff Olson did his story, and I said, look, you got 5 minutes to talk about the car wreck, and then I want to move on. I want to know what happened next. Because the whole point of the film is basically how can we take what these experiencers are telling us from the other side, their experience on the other side, how can we take that and make our lives better while we still think we're here in the physical? I didn't want it to be a curiosity. I didn't want it to be, something to engage the ego, to say, oh, isn't that horrible that they died that way? I wanted it to be an opportunity to expand our consciousness. The basic premise of the film, again, is that we're not who we think we are, right? We're not these physical bodies. We're something much greater than that. And what's going on here, by the way, is not what we think is going on here. You know, there's something much bigger going on. And the premise is if we knew that, if we knew who we really were, that would change everything. You know, again, the question is, who do you think you are? If I think I'm this body that has a limited lifespan of maybe 75 years, if I'm lucky, that has to fight with other bodies over resources and is justified in doing whatever I think I need to do to survive, then this world kind of makes sense, right? It's ugly, it's painful, you know, it's a friggin' mess, especially right now, but it kind of makes sense. But what if that premise is completely wrong, right? I don't have to tell you guys, but there's a whole world out there that thinks that this is who we are, and that once this is done, we're done. Somebody who falls into that category is my own mother. I love my mother. We have a great relationship, right? And she actually came to, we did a screening of the documentary on Long Island a week and a half ago. Catherine was there, a bunch of other people were there. And my mother came, and my mother, she says, I love you, Peter. I love how passionate you are about this. She says, you're doing such a great job. It looks so professional. You're really doing great. But you have to understand, I think this is all a big fairy tale. She's not a believer in life after death. She's not a believer in the afterlife. You know, to her, this is it, right? You get one shot, you get what you can get while you can get it, and then you get out, right? And honestly, you know, first I thought I had to convince her, right? I had to change her mind. What do you know, come on, Ma, what are you kidding? You know? And then I realized, no, you know, she's entitled to have her opinion. And I realized too, you know, until we get there ourselves, none of us is really going to know what the other side is like. And I even ended up saying that at the beginning of the documentary. Because, and again, this is why I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm not trying to prove anything. I don't go into any of the veridical proof or any of the evidentiary stuff that consciousness continues. I don't go there at all in the film because I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm wanting to present another way of looking at the world of life and the afterlife, and maybe, just maybe, plant a seed for somebody who hasn't really thought about all this. Right? Now, with my mom in particular, it's like the other day I realized, you know, that was me for most of my life. I mean, I wasn't a believer in the afterlife. You know, I wasn't necessarily a non-believer, but I wasn't really, you know, I wasn't expecting much, you know, and part of that had to do with my idea about God, about a higher power, about the creator, and all that. But what I also realized was I was afraid to believe. Because what if it's not true? What if I spend my whole life expecting, hoping for this moment, you know, of what we hear about in the near-death experience, and it's not true, you know, or worse, what if it's what my church was telling me happens if you're bad? What if that's what's going on? So I can't speak for her, and maybe I'm projecting onto her and everybody else who's not a believer, but maybe, you know, I can say for myself, there was some level of fear in that. And so it could take a while to move somebody from that. But they have to want it, right? They have to choose that. So the other thing that happened, so I've been literally working on the film for 2 years now, and in April of 2023, I hadn't seen my brother for a couple of years. He moved from New York to Florida. He was living in a condo complex with one of my sisters. Hadn't seen him for a couple of years. You know, we weren't estranged or anything like that, but we weren't as close as we could have been. He was 3 years younger than me, and I had this feeling that I had to go visit him. So I called him up and I just kind of said, you know, can I come down for a week, you know, hang out? We haven't seen each other in a while. And he said yes, you know, and so I went and we spent a week. And there was a lot of unhealed stuff, but over the years, especially once I got into 12-step, you know, part of the 12-step program is to make amends to people that we've harmed and you know, take responsibility for our part in the relationship. And I had done that to a large extent with him, but there was still some unfinished business. And I did my best that week to heal that stuff, and to leave things as good as they could be between us, which is a good thing because 2 weeks later he died, completely unexpected. And it was really, really, really hard. You know, I I never imagined I could be so sad. My dad had passed a few years earlier, and that was difficult. But somehow it was different with my brother, and it was I was completely bereft, grief-stricken, whatever you want to call it. And what happened was my sister, who lived, close to him, found his body, and she asked me to come down and help with the estate and everything. So I went down there, and I ended up being down. He was a coin collector, right? So he had boxes and safes, and he had all kinds of coins, and there was no inventory. There was no, we had no idea what anything was worth. We had no idea what anything was, and she was overwhelmed with grief, and it was basically he was single. He didn't have any kids. He wasn't married or anything. So it was up to us really to sort things out. And it was the most difficult 3 months of my life, I think. I ended up staying down there for almost 3 months. That's how much stuff he had. And about halfway through, I just wanted to give up on everything. I mean, I was so sad. I was so grief-stricken, and including the film. I was just like, I can't. And what happened, what I realized shortly thereafter was, this was really forcing me to decide whether or not I believed all this stuff. Right? Because here I am bringing a film to the world that says there is no death. Life is eternal. We're not these bodies. We're spiritual beings, and we're divine spiritual beings, right? We come here with a purpose. This is not, again, this is not who we really are. And did I really believe all that? And at that point, I started watching some of the interviews that I hadn't watched yet, that I had recorded with people. And slowly, it was working on the film again that helped me pull out of that grief, and helped me pull out of that pit that I was in. And, to a large extent, I feel like I mean, I'll miss him forever, and I can still feel the loss and the sadness, but I'm not anywhere in terms of where I was, in terms of the sadness and the grief and everything. But what I want to say to people is that, feel your feelings. Just because you may believe that life is eternal, just because you may believe all the stuff that the NDEers are telling us, that we're hearing all the time now about the nature, our true nature as spiritual beings, we're here. We're not here to be spiritual. We're already that. That's who we really are. We're here for the human experience. And there's value in that. And we talk about this in the film. We talk about why we come here, why we forget who we really are, and why we have the experiences that we have. And so don't deny your feelings just because you think that life is eternal. Now, if you really don't have that grief, that's great. But if you have those feelings, allow yourself to have that experience, because that's part of the process, I think, is to experience all of it. And so, it was nice for me to have a place to go in terms of the interviews and the film and the work I was doing that really helped me heal that loss, which is what it was, and that's what I want to do with this film. I want to heal, first of all, I want to heal the fear. Many people there's still so much fear of dying and of death, and it makes people do crazy things while they're still alive. And then also, to heal the loss, to heal, the feeling of sadness or grief, because that is real. Even though life is eternal, see, we're having a human experience, and those feelings are part of the human experience. Now, one of the questions I ask in the film is life on the physical plane an illusion? And I get all kinds of responses to that. But there's a general consensus that this reality is more of a dream, more of an illusion when compared to an ultimate reality, our true home, what a lot of the NDEers refer to as heaven or home, a higher dimension, a higher frequency, a higher vibration. So the general consensus is that this is not that in terms of reality. But I also come to the conclusion for myself, and I share this in the film, it doesn't mean that there's not value in this experience. And it doesn't mean that this experience is not meaningful. A very crude metaphor or example that I give is, we go to the movies here on Earth, we go to a movie theater, we sit in the theater for 2 hours in the dark. We know we've seen all the actors in 15 other films. We know the whole box office story for this film, and we know behind the scenes that people were fighting over the size of their trailer on the lot when the film was being made, and there's this whole scandal in Hollywood. And yet we sit and we watch that movie, and if the movie's good, we have these feelings, right? We have all the feelings. We feel excited, elated. We feel sad. We feel angry. We feel afraid. And that's why, by the way, they call it a movie. People want to be moved by the experience. And so the experience that we have is very real. Those feelings are all real. And yet, everything that's happening on that screen, we know is an illusion, is fake, is not reality. So it's a crude metaphor, but in a way, that's what's going on here. And then the other part to this whole thing is the veil of forgetting, right? So we have to forget who we are in order for this to really have any meaning or purpose and have any benefit for our soul, because we're here, again, my understanding, the people that I interviewed seem to share this view. The soul comes to have this experience, and there's some benefit in that experience for the soul. It's in a way, it's about growth, evolution, if you will. And again, a crude example that I use, in heaven, it's like reading the book on riding the bicycle. In the earth plane, you ride the bicycle. And not only do you ride the bicycle, but you fall off and you scrape your knees. And not only do you fall off and scrape your knees, but all your friends are laughing at you. That's the difference between heaven, so to speak, and the physical plane. We come here for the contrast, or what the law of one would call catalyst. And so it's through this conjured experience or conjured environment that we have these very real experiences that help our soul grow. Now, we don't have to grow. We don't have to evolve, because as souls, we're perfect beings. We are a fragment of perfection, if you will, of the creator, of source, whatever you want to call it, which is already perfect. But, eternity is a really long time, right? Eternity is longer than forever. And eventually, where I go for this is, if you guys remember Conversations with God, the book series by Neil Donald Walsh, he used to say, and I've heard this now in many places, another resource is Meher Baba, God Speaks, where the idea is that eventually, without the contrast, we cease to experience ourselves as who and what we really are. So in heaven, there is no contrast. It's like we need darkness to know ourselves as light. We need evil to know ourselves as good. We need cold to know what hot is. We need the duality, we need the polarity, we need the contrast. So we choose, we're here by choice. One of the questions in the film is, are human incarnations voluntarily chosen? And a bunch of people, some of you guys may know Franco Romero. Franco's great in the film, and he basically says, this is the hottest ticket in the universe. Souls are lining up to come to Earth at this time in history to be part of this awakening, this ascension. Some people talk about moving from 3D to 5D, all of that. And we're here because we want to be here. And by the way, guys, we came with a purpose. We came here to accomplish something. So I'm going to mention another website that I set up that I'd like you guys to check out. It's called itsTimeToRemember.org. ItsTimeToRemember.org. It's a nonprofit website that I set up. It has 7 of the key messages from the film in it on the homepage. It's only one page. I'm not taking donations. I don't want your money. There's no subscriptions. There's no fees. There's no nothing. All I want you to do is if you resonate with those 7 images, those 7 messages, find a way to share them. All right? And my dream is to be driving down a highway someplace in the middle of nowhere and to see a billboard with those 7 messages on them that somebody posted. And their messages like, there is no death. We're divine spiritual beings created by love, as love, and for love. And one of the last ones is we're here by our own choosing, and we came with a purpose. And the question is, isn't it time that we got on with it? And so I'm inviting everybody to begin to, this is not to say ignore your day-to-day life, right? Don't stop making car payments or paying your rent or going to work every day, but begin to at least explore the idea that you came here to accomplish something else in addition to that. Now, not everybody has this grand purpose to save the world, right? It's not, some people, their purpose, their sole purpose is to be the best grandparent that they can be to a child who may be having trouble at home and is difficulty in school or something like that. And that one grandparent is that one light for that kid, that one kid, right? And that kid may go on to save the world or discover a cure for cancer or whatever. But my point is, not everybody has this grandiose purpose, but we all have a purpose. And it's not just for our benefit, right? We come here to be part of and to help others, to be part of a larger whole, and to make a contribution at whatever level we can to the highest good for everybody. I don't know how long we go. It's almost 8 o'clock. So, Catherine, do I have a time limit? I have a few more things I want to say, and then I'll wrap it up, and we can do questions.
Yeah, that would be great. We're doing well with time, so.
Do we go till 8:30, or what time do we go till?
Well, we can go a little past 8:30 with the questions and answers and stuff, but
All right.
yeah, I think you started about quarter after, so you're about 45 minutes now. So we have time for
Okay.
you to complete. Yep.
Do you guys want to see a clip from the movie?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, maybe we'll do that. So let me finish up my thought on purpose. So the other thing I would just want to say about soul plan, life purpose and all of that. For me, I spent most of my life, especially my adult life, well, most of my adult life pursuing goals, things that I thought were going to bring me something that I wanted. They're going to bring me money, happiness, fame, fortune, whatever. And I shared earlier, I mean, I've accomplished a lot of things. And by the way, I'm not the most accomplished, creative person you'll ever meet or anything. I got a long way to go. But I've done some cool stuff, and I'm proud of the body of work that I've created, and I'm proud of the things that I've done that have helped other people. But what I realized was, there's a divine purpose, there's a higher purpose. And a couple of years ago, and I kind of reaffirm this all the time now. A couple of years ago, I just basically said, I was just kind of wearing myself out. I was exhausted and just stressed and all this other stuff. And I just said, God, what's your plan for me? How can I best serve your plan? I've been studying Course in Miracles for like 30 years now. And there's references over and over in that book to, playing our part in God's plan for salvation. And if you don't like the word God, use creator, use source, whatever. And so people ask me, how do you find your purpose? I say, let your purpose find you. And the way you do that is make yourself available for the highest good. It's not my highest and best. It's the highest and best for everybody. How can I play my part in that? What can I do? How can I be of service in the world? And ever since then, this film is a great example. I mean, there's a lot of people in this movie that I never in a million years thought would say yes to it, to participate in it, right? They had no reason, especially some of them, they came all the way to New Jersey, I mean, I offered to pick them up at the airport and drive them back, take them out for dinner, But again, I'm not paying anybody's expenses. You know, I mean, it was very surprising to me. But I see that now as when I became willing to play my part in the bigger picture and the plan, then things started to open up. I haven't worked really in 2 years, and money seems to be coming in, so I'm taken care of financially. I've invested all my own money in this film, and I did that for a reason. I did that because having worked in Hollywood for 20 years, I knew that if I went to the studios or the streaming services or whatever with it, they would probably want to make it something else. And I don't want to do that. So, and I have no doubt that I'm going to get all my money back. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm just trusting that that's the way it's going to go, you know? And on a regular basis now, I just say, you know, how can I be of the best and highest service in the world? You know, what can I do to be of service? And so, you know, I never thought I'd be doing any of this really in the way that it's unfolding, but it is unfolding. And so, and I have, you know, I have hopes that, you know, we can really reach a lot of people with this film. And again, being the director of this film is totally being bigger than I think I am. You know, I still have, there's still those voices that say, who do you think you are? You know, what qualifies you to do this? You know, what's so special about you? You know, those negative voices. And now you know, the difference now is I just kind of say, all right, you know, thank you for sharing. And then I just get on with my day. You know, I don't let that dictate how I see myself. I don't let that dictate my actions in the world. And I just try to be nice to myself now. You know, I just try to love myself. And in the book, I talk about unconditional love, and I define unconditional love as being willing to love myself or another when I least like who they're being, when I least like who I'm being. You know, it's easy to love people when they're doing what we want them to do and they're being who we want them to be, right? I think that's why Ram Dass used to say, if you think you're spiritual, go spend a week with your family. You know, it's like, so that's the challenge slash opportunity for all of us, I think. All right, let me show you a clip from the film, and then we'll do some Q&A. I wasn't prepared, so I got to find a file. Hold on.
Oh, wait, I think I have to make you a co-host.
It looks like I can share. Let me see. Nope, sharing is not turned on. So you got to turn on sharing. I'll look for a clip in the meantime.
Okay, let me figure out how to make you a co-host real quick. So it's okay. Now you're a co-host.
All right, let's see if I can share. Let me turn on the sound. All right, tell me if you can hear it. Okay.
Each soul selects its own destiny and path, which includes the choice of incarnation, the law of one.
Are human incarnations voluntarily chosen?
Absolutely. This whole question about whether or not we had a choice to come down here, did we get forced down here? Are we forced to even stay here? Everything is about free will. You can't even imagine how much interest there is everywhere to participate in this. This is the hottest ticket in the entire universe.
Oh, I think this is the best thing going on anywhere, to be in human form incarnated on Earth at this time. I truly believe souls line up to be part of this experience.
There is a big demand, I've heard, on the other side to come and experience life. 100% we have a choice to be here, and I believe there are millions of souls that want to come to Earth. It is a gift for us to be here. It is definitely the soul's choice, as Earth is the densest, hardest learning ground for us to expand and experience, and we bring so much with us after.
When we experience things that are very difficult, we might say, well, I would never choose this. And from our human perspective, you might not. But from the higher perspective, from the soul's perspective, in order to grow, I think sometimes we choose to experience hardships.
This is something we wanted, and we wanted to do it with, we couldn't wait to do it. We're like, put me in the game, coach.
I've often thought about this question, and I've thought many times that I might be mandated to Earth. What did I do wrong? Why am I here again?
You know, when a climber is climbing Mount Everest, he's going to be suffering. He's going to be cold and tired and miserable. And there's going to be times where he says, why the heck did I do this? But he did it because he's taking on a big challenge, and he's growing and getting stronger from it. And it's the same with these lives. You know, we are doing the Mount Everest of physical incarnations by coming down here on Earth, and it's something to be proud of.
If you are here, you absolutely volunteered. And I do love the other one that I always hear. When I'm done on it, I'm never coming back. No, you're coming back,
I hear so often people go, I would never have chosen this. I would have never chosen this. And that's how I know that's exactly how they chose it.
On some level, we all chose to be here. We chose our parents. We chose our basic circumstances. And we knew, for the most part, what we were getting into.
It's only after we get here that humans forget who we are, and then we say, are you kidding? I am never coming back here again. We know that it's going to be challenging. We know that there's going to be pain as well as pleasure, but the soul also knows that's how we're going to grow. And the soul wants nothing more than to bring back more love to this beautiful experience of simply being the soul.
So that's an example of the Q&A. I'm going to show you an example of the first person account. Give me 1 second. This is, let me see if I have it. Some of you guys may know Tony Sikoria. Tony's been around for a long time. He was hit by lightning. So this is his. Am I still sharing? Do you still see my screen? Tell me if you can hear it. Tony Sikoria, MD, was struck by lightning during a family outing. In his near-death experience, Tony discovered that the soul continues after the loss of the body.
In 1994, my wife had a party, which she has every year, for her family, because there's so many people with birthdays in August, and so we would have a communal birthday party. This year, she decided to have it at the Sleepy Hollow Lake in Athens, New York. It's a beautiful lake, and we had a pavilion that was rented right next to the lake. And in the morning, it seemed like it was a beautiful day. And there were about 25 people there with a ton of kids as well. I was out at the barbecue doing my job, and I remembered that I hadn't called my mother that day, who was quite elderly. I walked around the building, and there was a payphone on the other side of this pavilion. And I put in her number and let it ring 5 or 6 times, and she never picked up. And so I said, well, I'll try again later. What I was not aware of is that a huge thunderhead had formed over the lake, and it was completely unbeknownst to me. When I had the phone next to my ear and I started to take it away to hang it up, suddenly I saw this huge flash of light comes out of the phone and hits me in the face, and I hear this incredibly loud crack. And it just threw me back like a rag doll. I went flying backwards. And a strange thing happened as this was going on was I knew I had been hit by lightning. I saw it, I heard it, and I knew I'd been thrown backwards. But suddenly I had this strange sensation of moving forwards. And I was very confused by it. And I remembered standing there going, I don't understand. I know I got hit. I know I got thrown back. And so why am I standing here wondering what just happened? As I was standing there, all of a sudden, I hear my mother-in-law screaming, and she's at the top of the stairs. I'm at the bottom. She starts running down the stairs right at me, and I thought, this can't be good. When your mother-in-law is screaming and running at you, something bad's going to happen. As she was coming down the stairs, I realized that she's not looking at me. She's looking off to her left. And I thought, what the hell is going on? As she gets down to the right where I was, it was like I didn't exist. And she just took off to her left. And I thought, oh, I'm going to follow her. I went probably 3 or 4 steps. And all of a sudden, I was confronted with myself on the ground. And I remember looking down at this body, and I thought, oh shit, I'm dead. And I remember that my mind was racing like crazy at the time, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. I thought when you died there'd be some bells and whistles or something would give you a clue that you were dead, but I had nothing. It was absolutely seamless. The only thing I could think of was that when I had that sensation of moving forward as my body was going backwards, that was my spirit separating from the body. And so here I am standing there. I'm right at the head of this body, and I'm looking down and realizing that I'm dead. I'm not in that body. And I get this sudden realization that, geez, I'm thinking just like I normally would. I'm thinking in the same vernacular that I would normally think. And it came to me that whoever I am, I always am. And this body is nothing but an empty shell that my spirit spent some time in. And I realized that there is no death, that our spirit just continues on. The moment we leave the earthly body, we move to the next phase. There was a woman who was standing behind me waiting to use the phone. She was there with her 12 or 13-year-old daughter. And it turns out that she was a nurse. And she ran over to me, and she got down on the floor, and she was going to start CPR. And so she starts doing CPR, and everybody's crowding around. And at this point, I'm thinking, well, there's no point in standing here. I wanted to go check on my family. And so I turned around and walked away. And I walked over to the stairs, and I started going up the stairs. And I get to about the 3rd step. All of a sudden, I realize that my legs are starting to dissolve. And I thought, holy crap, what is happening? And as I was going up the stairs, my form dissolved. I was nothing more than a ball of energy. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, that's all I was. And at that point, I thought, well, the stairs go off to the left to make the second transition. And I said, the heck with this. I just went right through the wall. When I got through the other side of that wall, my wife was sitting on a chair, and she was painting children's faces. She had no idea what had happened. And I made a specific note to myself of who the kids were and what position they were in, the position of the chairs and tables. And I don't know why I made a specific point of memorizing that, but it would turn out to be an important factor later on when it came time to check notes and see what I really witnessed, that there was no possible way for me to have witnessed. And I continued. And I went diagonally through that room, and I had the realization that, my family would be fine without me. And as I got to the roof line, I went through the roof, and things really started to change at that point. Suddenly, I'm falling into a river of pure positive energy. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever felt. If you could imagine absolute love and absolute peace, that's all you felt in this energy. And the energy went through everything and actually composed everything. As I was feeling this and came to this realization that this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to somebody. I mean, dying is one thing, but being able to die and experience this is unbelievable. So this river of pure positive energy is carrying me someplace, and I didn't care where it was going because it felt so amazingly great. I remember thinking this must be the God energy. And I realized that we're all part of this same energy force, and we are all connected. So I'm floating in this river of pure positive energy, and I was resigned to the fact that I was not going to see my family again. I was off on a new adventure. And so I reached a point where I'm ecstatic about where it's taking me. I was so excited about it. And all of a sudden, boom, I was back in my body. It was like somebody had flipped a switch, and I was pissed. I remember lying there going, no, I don't want to come back. Don't make me do this. I loved where I was going. I want to complete that. But I was back. The lady who had been doing CPR had stopped, and she was just kneeling next to me. I looked at her and I said, it's okay, I'm a doctor. She just laughed and said, you weren't a minute ago. I was embarrassed, and so I just kept my mouth shut. At this point, the police came and they called an ambulance, and I refused to go to the hospital because as a physician, I know what going to the emergency room is going to mean. I'm going to sit there for hours and hours, and they're going to tell me, yeah, you're alive, go home. I went home and I saw my physicians, and they said I was okay, and they cleared me to go back to work. And I was absolutely mystified by what had happened and what it meant. So the big lesson there is no death, and your spirit continues on and is everlasting. When we die, it's just a change. It's a phase change. We enter into a different state, but our spirit lives on. To know that there is something else that occurs after death is the greatest gift that anyone could ever give me. And to know that there is a force of absolute love and peace that underlies everything and makes up everything is one of the most valuable pieces of information that I could have ever gotten, especially moving forward with my life.
So that's Tony. A side effect of his NDE, that was his piano music. He never played piano before in his life, and he came back from his NDE, and now he's this concert pianist. He travels the world doing concerts. You know, this was his gift from one of the gifts he got from the experience.
Wow.
All right, so that's a small little bit. I have like 5 hours of footage. I think the film is going to be like 3 parts at this point because I have so much, good content. But that's a little bit of it. Let me just mention real quick. I don't know if you guys know, but Bethany has been really, really helpful, and she's helped arrange a screening of the film on May 29th. It's a Thursday in Connecticut at Manchester College. So we're going to be there at the end of May. It's a Thursday. And I'm planning right now an East Coast tour. I want to take the film. One of the great things about doing an in-person screening is that when the film is over, we've been doing audience Q&A. So if there are people from the film at the screening, they come up to the front and we ask the audience if they have any questions. And I think that's a really important part of this because I'm kind of pitching this as Afterlife 101, meaning this is for people who may have never heard of a near-death experience, or at least, maybe never heard of the life review or soul contracts or whatever. So I think it's really important to be of maximum value and service to the audience is to answer people's questions on the spot. So I'm planning an East Coast tour right now. I'm hoping to do at the end of or beginning of June, Washington, D.C., Raleigh, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, maybe Orlando, and maybe Boca down in Florida, and hopefully more to come after that. And that's been the best part, one of the best parts for me. The other thing I should mention is that so in order to honor the people who honored me by being in this film, I'm making everybody's full interview available on the website and on the YouTube channel. So most of the full interviews run, 30 to 60 minutes. Some are a little longer. But most people are only going to get a few minutes in the film. Even if it's a 5-hour film, they're only going to get a few minutes. So I want everybody's voice to be heard. So to honor them, all those interviews are available right now. Actually, there's 55 or 56 interviews available on the website. Again, the website is everysoulknows.com. The YouTube channel is at Every Soul Knows, and all those interviews are there. They're available for free. There's no subscriptions. In fact, I even cut the mid-roll ads out, so there's no ads in the middle. So people have, an uninterrupted viewing experience. And it's been great because every morning now I wake up and I check my inbox and there are comments from people who are just binge watching all these videos, all these interviews. And, in almost 6 months now, I've gotten like one mildly negative comment. All the other comments have been so positive. People are so grateful. They're thrilled. And that was the other thing I wanted to do. I wanted to create a resource for the audience. So after the film is over, they can go someplace and then watch everybody's interviews. So it was a way to create a resource for the audience as well as to honor the people who have honored me by participating. And I think that's it. We can open it up for questions if you guys want.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. All right. So I'm going to just, all right. Thank you. What a beautiful presentation you just gave. And it was well-rounded. We covered your book, we covered the film and your story and how everything happened for you. And one thing that really struck me, what you shared, and I think really important for people to know, and I've never really heard anyone present it like you did, but you said, for every door that opened, there were a lot of other rejections that happened. So you had, 5 to 10 things that didn't go your way, and then something did. So I like that you were able to share that, and I think that's important for people to hear. To just keep going.
You have to. We got to learn how to handle that disappointment, guys. I mean, that's like, that derails more people, and I see this a lot. There's a lot of people I know who are very talented artists, filmmakers, photographers, and they have a huge amount of talent, but they can't get out of their own way when it comes to presenting their work, to putting themselves out there. And I think a lot of it is just that fear of rejection, of disappointment, of failure. And they're very worthwhile people, and they're very talented people, and yet the world is never going to see their work because they haven't been able to get past that, and it's not in any way a judgment of them. I mean, that's how I spent most of my life. The point is, we write our own ticket in that regard. It's up to us.
Thank you. All right, we have a question from Bethany. She's wondering, How do you know if you haven't maxed your bigness? And how do you know when you've arrived at your correct intended size?
So thank you, Bethany. That's a great question. So this actually has come up. I did a bunch of, when the book first came out, I did a bunch of interviews and podcasts and a lot of people were like, you know, aren't you afraid you're going to be too big for your britches? You know, that kind of thing, like, and I said, look, it's a catchy title. It's not necessarily, so here's the thing. I know from my own experience that if I get too big for my britches, the universe is going to tamp me down. The universe is going to humble me. The universe is going to put me back in line pretty quickly. It's happened, and I've seen it happen with many other people. So I don't think you have to worry about being too big for your britches. The idea is to find, for me at least, I think the only thing that stands between most people and the life that they want to have are their thoughts and beliefs about themselves. And those thoughts and beliefs usually involve some variation on, you're not enough, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you're not lovable, you don't have what it takes, you're a disappointment. Who do you think you are? So, I'd almost rather, so the book is set up as a workbook. So at the end of each chapter, there are exercises that you can do. And some people are doing it in groups. And I did during the pandemic, I did 60 weeks, actually. We did a 60-week ongoing workshop where we went through the entire book together. So I took a group of people through the book. And by the way, all those videos are available for free on the BeBiggerToday.com website. So you can actually go through the whole book with us in the workshop. And, I just wanted to encourage people that if you think that you're too big, ask somebody else what they think, and they'll probably tell you, no, go even bigger, Course in Miracles says you don't ask too much from life, but far too little. And I think most of us don't ask enough. We ask too little. Now, again, if my intention is to personally, inflate myself, and if it's all ego driven and all that, I'm going to find out pretty quickly that that's not really in alignment, with the higher good, with the greater good. But if my intention is really to benefit everybody as much as I can, and again, this is not about, we're not here to save the world. The world doesn't need to be saved. But we are here to play a part in making things better for everybody, I think. That's my opinion. And so as long as you're in alignment with that, I don't think you can be too big. I mean, is Oprah Winfrey, maybe she's a bad example, but it's, somebody who you admire, who has a very high profile and does a lot of good in the world, are they too big? So I don't know if that answers your question, Bethany, but something to think about.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. All right. I see Raymond has his hand up, so I'm going to bring you in.
Hi, Peter and everyone. Maybe I should start first about this. I've been, me and Peter have this email communications going on. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I never even heard of this guy. Okay. But somehow his name came across my desk and I thought I'd reach out to him, and I've done a few favors for him, let's just say. But in any event, and it's kind of funny because I got these synchronicities going. I'm highly involved in the NDE arena and the afterlife communications arena. So, and everything you said before, Peter, how your path through life has gone, very, very similar to mine. Different, but very, very similar. Okay, just to let you know, I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur all my life. And you're actually talking to one of the biggest failures you ever met. Okay, I failed so many times I could write a book on what not to do in business. However, I hit a few home runs here and there. Okay, so things have worked out quite well for me, in fact. But in any event, I just want to mention, my wife passed away a little over 7 years ago. She was 10 years younger than me. I always thought that I would spend the rest of my life with my wife. only to find out she spent the rest of her life with me. Okay. And obviously, I went through all the grief things. I still feel it today. It's never going to go away. Okay. But it completely rearranged and changed my life. And I mentioned I got all these afterlife communications from her. Okay. It practically happens every day. Okay. And through a variety of means and all that. In fact, if I could, let me get my phone here. I'd like to show you a picture just to give you an example. I don't know how well this will show over the camera, but let me try here. Do you see the license plate?
Yes.
It says Ray 0614. Okay, which you probably can't see because it's kind of faded. That plate is from Georgia. Now, a couple months ago, I was driving down the street where I live here in the suburb of Chicago, a 4-lane road, 2 lanes in each direction. I got stopped at a light, and this car was in front of me. Okay. Now, this car came from Georgia, maybe 1,000, 1,500 miles away, happened to be on the same road that I'm on, happened to be in front of me, happened to stop at the same light that I'm stopped at. Now, the license plate, Ray 0614, well, obviously my name is Ray, but 0614, if you convert that to a date, that is June 14th. That's my wife's birthday. Is that just a coincidence or is it something else? Okay, I wanted to show you that because that's an actual visual thing you can see. Okay, and again, many, many, many ways she communicates with me. Okay, and I can go on and on with this forever. And actually, I'm living the life I never thought I'd be living right now. Probably like Peter. Okay, in regards to the fact that I'm, what I'm doing now, I never dreamed I'd be doing. For some reason, I've got these synchronicities going, and I'm meeting some of the world famous people in the NDE market. Okay, like John Audet. Now, John Audet, back in the late 70s, he started the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Okay, I just got Peter connected to him. He's one of the leading people in the world in that regard. And then there's Dr. Raymond Moody, who happens to be, I met him through John, because John and Dr. Raymond Moody are very close friends and work together. I had the great good fortune of meeting Dr. Eben Alexander. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Okay. If you haven't, he's a Harvard-trained neurosurgeon. In fact, he even taught at Harvard. About 11 years ago, he had a near-death experience, and he had bacterial meningitis of the brain. And when they did a series of tests and discovered that, they found out he had it at the level that he was practically brain dead. They told the family he probably won't live more than 3 days. He won't wake up from his coma. A week later, he's still in a coma. He wakes up and he's back to himself. Completely surprised all his doctors. Okay, in the beginning, he had amnesia for a little while. He didn't know who he was or where he was, but it all came back. And from that experience, he decided, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. He felt his calling was to go out into the world and tell his story. Now, he's been on 60 Minutes. He's been on 2020. In fact, that's how I met him. Okay, I saw his episode on 2020. After that episode, I got interested in what he was talking about. So he has a webpage, and I went on it. And how I met him is on his webpage, he has a tab that says contact us. So you put your email address and you put a little note. A week later, he personally responded to that. And this started in May. And then, so he responded to me. I responded to his response. The next thing you know, we got this email relationship going for months. Then in October, he emails me and says, hey, Ray, I'm coming to Chicago to give a speech. You want to get together? Well, hell yeah. Okay. So I got to spend 6 hours with him one-on-one, and he told me his complete story about what happened to him and all that. Even though he was in a coma for just a week, he felt he was in heaven for 2 years. Okay. So in any event, I don't know why this is happening to me, but it seems this is a path I must take. Okay. And
you got to write a book, Ray. You got to write your book.
Well, yeah, I might do that, and you talk about, I always believe the more you give, you open up the door to receive. That makes sense to you. It's the law of cause and effect. Okay. Being your brother's keeper, blah, blah, blah. And I want to express something to all the people listening here. A little quick story. In my 30s, my son joined the Cub Scouts, and they needed board members. So I raised my hand and said, okay, I'll get on the board. That was my first experience in working in a nonprofit. Did it for 2 years. I got hooked. Okay. And from that, I went in my community to youth commission, was on a board there. Then I got onto the Lions Club. I was the treasurer and a board member there. Then long story short, I got into bigger and bigger and bigger nonprofits over the years. I've been on the board of directors of at least 12 nonprofits. The bigger nonprofits had heavy hitters on the board, CEOs of companies, okay? And I really worked it hard in that endeavor. And okay, and a little footnote here, I was like a paycheck to paycheck kind of guy. You know, I really didn't have anything amounting to any great wealth or anything like that. But creating those relationships with those people is what, you know, these CEOs on the board of directors, they introduced me to people. And those people introduced me to people. And I never thought it was true, but who you know does make a difference. Okay. That fact made me lots of money. Not within a nonprofit, but in the business world because of these associations and these relationships I had with people. Okay. So, and again, it goes to the thing, the more you give, you open the door to receive. So I can go on here and keep talking, but you know, I want to leave room here for the other people.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, Peter, I watched the film. It's amazing. I hold you in high regard and I admire your efforts. You're on the right path.
All right.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank
We'll
you,
talk.
Ray.
We're going to talk.
Thank
By
you
the way,
for-
Eben was here. Eben was right in the chair over there. Great
Yeah,
guy.
the film. Check out the film. All right.
Yeah, if you guys want to watch the film, there's a preview that's available again on the website, Every Soul Knows, under the Watch tab, so you can watch it. It's a $3.99 rental because I got to cover some of the cost of the hosting. But if the money is an issue, just let me know. I'll refund the money. Since I just want to, I know we have other questions. Let me just, I want to just show you guys how far gone I am in my thing here. So since Ray is showing his.
Hold up. There you go. Oh yeah, afterlife. I love it.
The other thing is I was in a hospital last month. First time in 30 years I was in a hospital for surgery. Actually, it's just for a hospital in general. Again, this is how far gone I am. I'm hoping I have an NDE or at least an out-of-body experience during the surgery. You know, this is my thought going in to this surgery.
All right, let me bring Betsy in. She's been waiting. Here we go. Hey, Betsy.
Hi, it's nice to talk to both of you. Please excuse my appearance. I've been home with the flu for 5 days, so. But I couldn't help but notice that, Peter, you mentioned being in recovery a couple of times during your talk. I'm also 12 years recovered alcohol. And I'm a therapist who runs a partial program for substance abuse users. And so I'm just thinking that I'm kind of like, as you were talking, like my mind was just working about how much your message is needed in that community, like in the recovery community, because everybody, well, not everybody, but there's a tendency for people who are struggling, especially when they're initially trying to recover from substance use and abuse. People get stuck to their stories, right? And so I think the Be Bigger, it's a message that is desperately needed, but like it's something that I kind of like I come into I kind of headbutt all the time in my work. It's very hard to get people who are stuck to their stories and think of themselves as pieces of whatever, like that's how they'll talk to themselves, and I have to correct them like, no, you don't talk to anybody like that in here, including yourself, kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, have you reached out to the recovery community with this type of work that you've been doing, and like how has it gone?
Well, I mean, I had 25 years, in 12-step, different various programs, very active, sponsoring people, being sponsored, doing service and all that. There in those 12-step scenarios, there is, and I think for good reason, we're not inviting outside literature, which is what this would be, I've shared my story many times and all that, but not specifically anymore in terms of the recovery world. People want to work with the book. That's great. Like I said, it's great to do in a group, and all that. Listen, I mean, my heart goes out to, I mean, Betsy, I had my story. I hung on to my story for 30 something years, man. So I know, and my dad was sober for 45 years before he passed. And I remember his journey as well, and I really do think, I say this, my disease was not alcohol, it was not drugs, it was not the sexual stuff, it was not, whatever. My disease was self-hatred. It was a self-loathing that drove all of that insanity, and so, learning to love ourselves, and to, just like I said earlier, be my own best friend changes the whole equation with all of that. And I don't think it's just for people who are addicted or in recovery or any of that. I mean, I see it all over the place. I see it on the news. Although I actually don't watch the news. So, I see it on social media. It's all over, So learning to love ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, and then you can't help but be kind to others, and all that. So listen, I admire the work that you're doing. That work is so important and so valuable. And I certainly was helped in my recovery early on by people who, were doing kind of what you're doing, and people who really took that idea of service and giving back seriously. I mean, that saved my life, literally saved my life. So even though I'm not active now in any particular program, I still live my life by those principles, every day.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Betsy. All right, I'm going to bring Aaron in.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you for having Peter here as well, and opening me up to this quite amazing experience. Peter, thank you for enabling me to, let's say, get bigger in that 45 minutes. I really, I'm astounded. In my early 20s, I seen the film called What the Bleep, and it changed me significantly. And I'm getting similar kind of tingles in my system here now. It's prompting my intuition just to ask you a few questions and maybe share a few things with you. The negative internal dialogue, I suffered from that myself. I learned from surrendering my free will to a source greater than mine that there was great benefits and promises that have come through. I endeavor to live my life in service of others and help to the best of my ability. The best way I've found to do that is through an intuitive creative process, through mark making on a page, and hopefully bringing people to knowledge of their spirit. My first question for you is about Robert Temple. He was coming up with a book on the reason or the physical stuff that is our soul or spirit or consciousness or whatever. And he describes it as a kind of like centropic, like plasma made of ions. And I'm just thinking in this 3D world, that's a great materialist kind of description of our true identity. I'm wondering if you've heard of him at all. He's written a book recently. Jeffrey Mishlove is promoting it on his channel, New Thinking Aloud. That would be my first question. And I just have to say, Catherine also introduced on a platform similar to this to Alan Steinfeld, and he would talk about similar things to yourself in that the artist saves the soul of humanity while everything else is just dithering while Rome burns. He told me that, compliments of Terence McKenna. It was greatly uplifting, similar to your sentiment. So I was wondering if you were aware of that either. The unconditional positive regard that you talk about, Carl Rogers has given it to me too, and Christian Neff and a few others, but that unconditional love that if we give to ourselves can be given outwards, and that is what my aim is to do. I'm hoping I can like open a dialogue with you in some form. I don't want to be talking about myself now in any manner, but I have a visual arts career. I'm trying to help people through being creative. I have an exhibition coming up in May. I feel like I'm negative about whether it'll work out, but every time I do it, I seem to get results. And so just powering on what you said there, it kind of helps me. And William Bulham, I found a book of his recently. I haven't been able to relax a little bit without the PTSD I'm suffering from reading it. I was in a car crash a little while ago. I thought my life was going to be a disaster, and all of a sudden, like when you said there, I realized something spoke to me and it said, Aaron, this is how you get on with your arts career. This is how you bring the visual image to the world. So I just wanted to identify with you on that level. The human experience, Tibetan dream yoga, it's dreamlike and waking life. It talks to us about the combination of the two and how waking life is very similar to the dream realm. You touched off that, and I just wanted to mention that Tibetan dream yoga is very similar to that. I wanted to know if you knew much about that. And when you said you had that deja vu experience when you were talking contemporaneously, I had tingles going up and down my spine. I was going, Aaron, it's a great opportunity to open a dialogue with this gentleman to see what he, I don't know. I don't want to ask you for anything. I really don't. I want to see what I could offer. But then I think, who am I to offer someone of such a caliber anything? And lastly, I loved in the video where the gentleman said, who I am, I always am. How wonderful is that? So beautiful. And the Biglow Institute, I'm just wondering if you're aware of the Biglow Institute in relation to funding. Perhaps there might be something there, because he went to extravagant lengths to prove evidence of the afterlife and wrote a series, or he put a competition out with a series of essays. But without going on, I'm so grateful, Peter, and I can reinforce those 3 questions if you wanted me to, without me waffling.
Yeah, you covered a lot, Aaron. So yeah, if you can just recap them real quick. But I do want to say, number one, congratulations on the exhibition. I think that's amazing. That's great. Yeah, give me the questions again.
Sure. The first one was Robert Temple. He's recently written a book, and it's a materialist description of the centropic plasma-like ions, which would constitute our spirit.
So I'm vaguely familiar with his work. I haven't studied any of it. I'm not a big scholar, to be honest with you, and I'm thrilled. Honestly, I'm just going to put this out there, guys. What I'm finding right now in terms of information that's helpful is a YouTube channel called GFL Station, Galactic Federation of Light Station, GFL Station on YouTube. The best channeled information that I'm getting right now, and information in general. I will say, Aaron, for me, that we talk a lot about mind over matter and all that, and I would just say there is no matter. There's only mind, and so any kind of a materialistic or physiological, I don't even know the words, explanation for any of this doesn't really resonate so much with me. Not to say that they're wrong. They may very well, and it may very well be an adequate description of that. But for me, it's the whole idea of consciousness and what that is. I mean, we could spend, and obviously people do spend years debating that, discussing that. I think the biggest thing for me is to begin to go within and listen to my heart, listen to my intuition. I don't, other than when I injured myself, I don't hear voices. My guidance comes through my intuition. And so I try to get quiet every morning. I do a 30-minute meditation in the morning, and I'll do a little bit, maybe 10 minutes at night before I go to sleep. My main goal, I do what I call a smile meditation. So when I sit for 30 minutes, my only goal is to smile as big and as long as I can, right? Because I remember reading somewhere years ago that you can change your physiology, you could change your neurology, your neurobiology by changing your physiology, So, and it's very helpful to just smile for 30 minutes. And then to notice when the smile goes away, and to notice that there's a thought behind that. And then, oh, okay, do I want to continue to think that thought? Because look at the effect that it's had on my emotional state. In my book, I talk about what I perceive as the link between our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions, and our words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in life. So if I have crappy thoughts, I'm going to have crappy feelings. If I have crappy feelings, I'm going to speak crappy words and take crappy actions. If I speak crappy words and take crappy actions, guess what kind of outcomes I'm going to experience in my life? Now, the thing is, I talk about power and responsibility and how they're the same thing in the book. And so it's this idea that until I take responsibility for my experience, which includes my thoughts and my feelings and my words and my actions, not much is going to change. Now, I kind of went a little bit from what you were talking about in terms of, you know, the materialistic or reductionistic view of things. But, so it's not to negate the human experience in any way. Course in Miracles says to deny the body and the worldly experience is a particularly unworthy form of denial. So it's not about denying the world. It's not about denying our experience here. The Course in Miracles talks about forgiving the world. Our function is to forgive all of this. That's the way home. That's the way to free ourselves. It's our resistance. It's fighting against what is. It's judging and condemning the world that keeps it going and keeps us stuck in it. So whether I'm plasma or ions or any of that, my job is still to forgive the world, the illusion that I think I see, if I want to be free of it. And in terms of a spiritual practice, guys, this is where I come out. Again, take what you like and leave the rest. You know, I used to meditate for hours, right? Every morning. And then 2 hours later, I'd be on the highway and I'd be cursing out the guy who just cut me off, and I'd be rushing to, and I really got the joke of that, you know? It's like, so my spiritual practice now is just be as kind as you can to as many people as you can, including yourself, for as long as you can, especially when you don't feel like it. That's for me, that's the fastest way to the Godhead, whatever you want to call it. It's through kindness, compassion. Forget about meditating. Forget about all chanting. I mean, again, if that works for you, that's great. But it really comes down to, for me at least, to who am I choosing to be in the world? And at every moment, I'm always choosing. And again, Course in Miracles says the choice is always one of either love or fear, judgment and condemnation, or forgiveness and compassion. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that, you know? And again, if I'm plasma, then so be it. It'll work itself out.
That's super interesting. I've always tried to find some kind of scientific basis in which that I could throw at the materialists, because I often would be ridiculed on account of me describing the mystical experiences I've had. And I would always say, you know, consciousness is non-local, and it's fundamental, and it's primary, and they can't argue with that. So that plasma kind of thing is just evidence of their soul for them if necessary. But like you say, you don't have to save the world, I don't think. I think maybe I grew up kind of thinking that.
Yeah, just love those guys. Just love the shit out of them. You know, love the materialists. If you're a Democrat, love the Republicans. The only way this world is going to change, guys, is by us loving it to death. And that means not judging any of it, not making anybody wrong. And again, you know, one of the messages that I love from the near-death experience, there's three components that I see. Everybody's is different, but there's three kind of general themes. One is when they leave the body and they recognize that that's not me. What you heard a minute ago from Tony, all right? I don't know what that is, but it's not me. Half the time they don't even recognize themselves. You know, they're looking at that body. They don't even recognize that as them. So the first message is we're not our body. Number two, they talk about this experience of unconditional love. And it's not a feeling kind of thing. It's a beingness. It's who we are. Is this love, this unconditional, unbridled, passionate, compassionate love. And they all say there's no words to really describe it. That's how wonderful it is. And then the third component is this idea of oneness and unity, and this understanding that we are all of it. We are everyone and everything, right? So whether it's the Republicans or the reptilians, you know, find a way to love those bastards, you know, love, acceptance, love, you know, bless them, bless everyone and everything, including yourself. And if the whole idea of multiple incarnations, my battery is going to die on my computer. Don't go away. Sorry.
It's okay. Great questions, everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine. This is breathtaking stuff.
All right. Hopefully we're good. Sorry about that. I didn't think we would be going this long. So oneness, right? We're all connected. We're all one at some level. Now we're all individuated parts of the same whole. That's the way I see it, right? And we're all fractals of source. But if there's no such thing as time, right? And you hear that a lot with the NDEers, and you hear that, you know, our lifetimes are not sequential. They're all happening at once, right? And if I'm one with everyone and everything, then I am that Republican, or I am that Democrat, or I am that reptilian, or I am that Arcturian, or I am that right now. So the only answer is love. The only answer is to bless. The only answer is to be compassionate. Now, loving another doesn't mean that we stop loving ourselves. All right. So while we think we're in this body and we think we're having these experiences, it's helpful to know how to have healthy boundaries. That's chapter 8 or chapter 7 in the book. All right. I spent a lot of time talking about while we think we're here, like forgiveness doesn't mean that we let other people walk all over us. Right. In this world, you can forgive somebody and still call the police, but you're doing it for a different reason. Right. It's not to get even. It's not to hurt somebody else. Right. Having spent, again, years in 12-step recovery, you know, I can't tell you how many times I heard people say, you know, that night I spent in jail changed my life. So if you're calling the police, if you do it from love for yourself and for the other person, that still, as far as I'm concerned, that qualifies as kindness, forgiveness, what we're talking about here. So, all right, I want to just be respectful of the time. So what was your next question, Aaron?
Oh, just no, thank you. It's just out of the Bigelow Institute. I'm sure you're aware of it, but I just thought your work
I'm aware
parallels.
of that. Yeah, I'm aware of them. I think I've actually reached out to them. I don't know that I heard back. I'm not worried so much or looking for funding right now because I have enough to finish the film, and I know it's gonna. I want to have my control, my freedom to do it the way I want to do it, creative control. So I'm sure all that's going to work out. And by the way, Jeff Mishlove is in the film as well. You didn't see him, but he's in the movie.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, he is. He's awesome. All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Okay, and now we have John. Let me get you in here.
Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for your talk. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So, I was wondering if you could talk. At the beginning of your talk, you were discussing the struggles that you had with your negative self-talk and with not having confidence and struggling with negative core beliefs and that sort of thing. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little more about how you dealt with those issues and turned your life around so that you were able to so your mind became your best friend, as you put it, rather than your worst enemy. And I guess that leads into if you could talk a little bit more about the format of your book, which you just did. You just in answering Aaron's question, you talked about that a little bit. I was wondering if you could kind of give a little more detail about the process you went through to heal yourself and how you incorporated that into your book, please.
Yeah, well, John, thank you. That's a great question. Thank you for your support here today. I appreciate it. I saw you nodding and responding while we were talking, so I appreciate that. It's good for me to get feedback. I will say this, it's everything that you just asked is in the book, right? So it's really kind of laid out. The biggest thing for me, we can't change the program if we're not aware of the program. It literally is like a computer program that's running. At least it was for me. And it's what happens is, when we have challenges, especially as kids, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or anything like that, but I have spent a lot of time dealing with my issues and helping other people with theirs. I noticed that, when we have negative messages, especially as kids, it's so painful that it's overwhelming. We can't deal with it. So what happens is it's suppressed. All that negative stuff gets pushed into the subconscious, right? And the other thing, children are egocentric. What does that mean? It means that we make everything that happens about us, for the most part. There are some kids who come in kind of defiant and all that, but a lot of kids are, again, I'll just speak for myself, I really internalized all that negative messaging. I thought it was my fault when my mother was upset. I thought it was my fault when my father drank. I thought it was my fault when, all of that. And that's overwhelming for a child. And when it's so negative, you can't function, you can't deal with it. So it's kind of a defense mechanism, it's all repressed. The problem is it doesn't go anywhere. It becomes the subconscious program that's running our lives. So you got to be aware of that. And that means slowing down. It means being present. It means being in the moment. And I talk about in the book, it's almost like becoming a forensic investigator. If you're conscious enough in the moment to say, oh, I'm feeling unworthy, I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling less than, and that's causing me to act or react the way I'm reacting right now in the moment with this person. If you get to that point, great. But most of the time in the moment, it's really hard to have that presence. So what I say is we become like forensic investigators. So in that thing that happened with my mother last week at dinner, when I felt this way and then I said that, or when I said that thing or did that thing, what must I have been feeling in that moment? And more importantly, how must I have been seeing myself in that moment? Because I always say the problem is never the situation. The problem is always and only how I see myself in that situation. See, if I thought I could handle whatever was coming up with my mother or with my neighbor or with a client or with whoever, it wouldn't be as much of a problem. The problem is that I don't think I can handle those things, and that triggers the old programs, the old reactions. And that's really good news because we often can't change the situations of our lives, at least not in the short term, the external situations, but we can always change how we see ourselves. And with a new empowered idea about myself, I'm going to have a whole different relationship with everybody in my life. So we can be forensic investigators and say, in that thing that happened with so-and-so, what was going on? But you got to be willing to spend the time to look at that, and stop blaming them. Here's the other thing, all right? In the book and in life, I say, look, the biggest lie that the ego tells us is when we say, you make me feel, all right? So whoever the you is, and sometimes it's like, oh, baby, you make me feel so good. But most of the time it's, oh, you're an asshole, I'm angry and it's your fault. In both instances, that's a lie. Nobody makes us feel anything. At some level, we're choosing those responses. Now, again, I got to qualify this because people's steam starts coming out of their ears. This is not to say that other people don't act inappropriately at times, right? It's not to say that I haven't acted inappropriately at times, all right? But they're still not making me feel anything. When I'm present and when I recognize that I have a choice as how I'm going to respond as opposed to react, even the biggest triggers no longer get to me. All right. So again, I'm not perfect with any of this. I could cite 10 examples from this past week where I had that reaction instead of responding. but it's to become more aware and then to recognize that I have a choice and to recognize that any choice that I make is going to have a consequence, right? So an example from this week is I lashed out at somebody because they were really annoying me. And I was polite, but I was firm. And they reacted in a really negative way that I wasn't expecting, right? So now I can put my forensic investigator hat on and kind of take a step back and say, all right, so what was going on in that moment? In that moment, my computer was crashing. There were 5 things going on, and I just felt overwhelmed. And then this other thing happened, and I knew who was doing it, so I went after them, and that caused this whole reaction. And it was because I didn't think I could handle that situation. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling, there was going to be some negative consequence in that moment. That had nothing to do with the person who was playing their music too loud, a neighbor kid who was playing their music too loud. And yet I didn't lash out, but I was not as nice as I could have been in terms of asking him to turn his music down. And and here's the other thing. Again, chapter 6 in the book, anger begets anger and defensiveness begets defensiveness, right? If I'm defensive, guess what's going to come back? If I'm angry, guess what's going to come back? The really important thing that I've learned about anger is that anger is really an expression of fear. If I'm angry, I'm actually afraid. Now, why is that important? Well, if I approach somebody from a place of anger, anger usually means I'm blaming them for how I feel. People don't like to be blamed for how other people are feeling, right? So that's not going to go over too well. But if I recognize, wow, in this moment, like let's say this kid who was blasting his music, if I recognize in that moment, I'm angry because I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that, I'm on a Zoom and he's blasting his music and it's going to interfere with the Zoom, right? If I approach him from that place and say, gee, if you could please turn down the music because I'm concerned that it's going to interfere with the Zoom that I'm having, which is important to me, and I kind of explain a little bit and let him know I'm not blaming him. I'm actually saying this is what's really going on with me. And I've had this experience now many times. So instead of attacking that person and directing anger at them, I tell the truth, which is that I'm really afraid of some consequence that's related to what that person is doing. 9 times out of 10, they stop what they're doing and they want to help because I'm not blaming them. I'm not attacking them. And now all of a sudden, they become an ally instead of an adversary. Imagine if nations did this with other nations, or at least neighborhoods did this with other neighborhoods. It changes everything. But we don't know. We just react, and we're reacting because we really are terrified. We're a bunch of little kids on this planet, terrified that, we're going to be taken advantage of at best or annihilated at worst by our brothers, our spiritual brothers and sisters. We're completely out to lunch as to what's really going on here. I don't know if that helps, John, but
it did. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank
Excellent
you.
advice. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. All right. So we are coming up at 2 hours, so we want to end this soon. But I want to make sure that everybody had a chance. So there was just a question in the chat. What was your biggest takeaway or aha moment from all of the interviews that you did? And is there any one cohesive idea that encompasses all of the interviews?
So I have a 2-part answer for this. So first is what I described earlier, these common elements, these 3 common elements, right? The recognition that we're not our body, the recognition that what we really are is love in a way that we can't even imagine in this incarnation. And this idea that we're all connected, that we're all one, same finger, we're different fingers on the same hand, different leaves on the same tree. What that means as a practical matter is what I do for you, I do for myself. But what I failed to do for you, I also failed to do for myself. And again, I think we're going to, as a culture and society, we're going to see a lot of that very soon. You know, there's a lot of people who are acting as if, and I'll be really careful what I say here. So there are consequences coming for everybody and the choices that we're making at every level. But that's not the biggest revelation. The biggest revelation for me is, you know, some of the best times. So here's the deal. If you're from out of town and I'm gonna interview you, fly into Newark, not JFK or LaGuardia, but if you fly into Newark, I'll pick you up, I'll bring you to the location, we'll do the interview. If we have time, I'll take you out for dinner. If not, I'll take you back to the airport, same day if you can, so we don't have to stay overnight. And it's been that time in the car with all these people. And again, I'm not going to name names, but it's some of the biggest people in the space. And again, some of the people you've never heard of. But in every case, it's been so wonderful to get to know them as people. And number one, find out that they are just people. All right. I say this with the most love and the most compassion. You know, even people who have died have issues, in my opinion. And so just to see that they're just people, they got issues just like all of us. But the other part of this is they really are my heroes. And some of you, you know, I'm not an experiencer. Some of you are experiencers. You know this as well as anybody. But these are people who are telling their story, some of them for 20 years or more. And it hasn't always been a cakewalk. You know, they've put up with a lot of crap, you know, starting with their own family or their own doctor telling them that they're crazy or whatever, you know. And back in the day, some of these people were medicated or institutionalized or marginalized or ridiculed. The other thing I'll say is most of them, from what I can tell, they ain't getting rich off of this, guys. This is not, you know, they're not, and they're still telling their story. And my opinion, it's just my experience, is, you know, from what I've seen and what I believe is most of them are doing it because they want to make a difference in the world. They want to have a positive impact on the world, you know, and so they're the heroes in my book, you know, showing up week after week for podcasts and, you know, people trolling, still years later, people trolling them on social media, and then the public debunking. You know, you look at like Anita Moorjani or Evan Alexander or people like that. I mean, they put up with so much crap, you know, people trying to disprove, you know, I mean, it's just, it's insanity.
Yeah.
And every one of them, again, this is just my experience, but every one of them was so nice, was so kind, you know, was so committed to having a positive impact. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's like, so that was the biggest takeaway. Excuse me. That was the biggest takeaway for me, quite honestly, is to just meet them as people and see, you know, on one hand, they're just like everybody else. They got issues. You know, on the other hand, they really honestly want to make a difference, a positive difference in the world. And many of them are doing it, you know. I mean, many of them, because I know people come up to me after the film and they tell me the impact that, you know, and one of the reasons I interviewed 60 people, it's now close to 65, is because I recognize that not everybody's going to relate to Eben, right? There are going to be people in the audience who are not going to relate to his story, but they may relate to that person's story or this person's story, you know? And so I wanted to give as much as possible a variety for the audience, you know, to relate to be impacted by. So, you know, you know, my mother says to me, I told her, I said, I have 3 more interviews this month. She's like, what are you doing? Why do you keep doing this? You know, part of it is I love it. I love the top. It's nothing else I'd rather do with my time, you know, and again, not being an experiencer, not being a contactee. And now I'm really deep. I'm really deep in the ET stuff and the, you know, and all of that. I mean, I'm really in the rabbit hole on all that. what was I saying? But you know, there's nothing else I'd rather do, and I do feel like this is important. But again, I can't say, it's not my job to save anybody. You know, people have to want, and I know this from my 12-step work, you know, people have to want to change. And until that happens, but I think it's also important for us to be ready to help if people want help, to be there, to comfort. I mean, the great thing about IONS, you know, and again, I don't have to tell you guys, is how much support they provide for experiencers. You know, I mean, it's amazing. And I had no idea when I started, you know, even 2 years ago, I really had no idea what a lot of you guys went through coming out and telling your story. I mean, I never really thought about it, you know? And so, you know, we can all be of service in that way and making it safe enough. And then, you know, look, my 18-year-old niece, and then I'll stop. My 18-year-old niece is the best example of all this, right? I love this kid. You know, I don't have any kids of my own, but if I did, I love all my nieces and nephews, but in particular, and she's 18, very into, you know, who's dating who and who's wearing what on Instagram, and, you know, not really, from what I could tell, not really too, you know, interested in the afterlife, right? She watched the film and, you know, she told me, she said, she just lit up. She said, I never thought about all this. And she's just said, this is amazing. And I can see now, actually last night, I know she's, you know, she's got some challenges and I know meditation would help. And so I just texted her last night. I said, do you want to meditate together for 5 minutes? Right. And in the past, she would have never even, and she was right there. We had a great meditation for like almost 10 minutes, actually, you know, on the phone, on Zoom. And I know if I can get to her, I can get to anybody, you know. But again, she's got to choose it. You know, people have to. So all we can do is just make it available, and then let you know if you build it, they will come. That's kind of what I'm doing with this film. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's a mandala effect. If you build it, they will come. I heard that maybe that's something else, but all right,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God. You shared so much wisdom and beauty tonight. And uh, just thank you so much for being here and for being so giving and for all the work that you're doing in the world. It's just making such a difference. Yeah. And when I went to the preview a couple weeks ago, I could see just the light in people's faces. They were just, people were lit up to get this information. And when I was sitting there and I brought up about IANS to somebody, there were like two people that turned around and uh, people wanted to know more and they were writing down information and when I told them they have sharing groups and all, people are hungry for this kind of information and for this knowledge. And I think a lot of people are experiencers, although they may not think they are. Like that voice that you heard, that intuitive voice, I would say that's an experience there. That's a life-changing experience. And it helped you to just, switch gears and go in another direction and look at all the work that you've done with that book and the Zoom groups that you've had and how many people your book has helped and will continue to help. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I see that. I get it. And now I'm just grateful, you know. I mean, it's kind of an honor. The thing is, not everybody, you see, we're in our own little bubble, the IANS groups and all that. We're all in our own little bubble, but there's a whole world out there that you're right. They're clueless about a lot of this. So, I think it's our job is, I'm using that word loosely, is to just make it available in whatever way, whether it's one-on-one with people or what I'm doing or, whatever you guys choose.
Yeah.
Aaron with your art, whatever it is to reach people. There's
That's
lots
right.
of ways to do that.
Right. And we all have our own unique way. So whatever we're called to do and we do it and it all ripples out and everybody is touched in some way. So, all right. Well, I just want to say thank you again, Peter, for being here with us. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for your wonderful questions and for your presence. And again, this was just wonderful. And so I just want to say many blessings to all of you. And let me just think real quick. All right, so this is the last. So next week, the first Tuesday of the month, we'll be having our safe space sharing group. So I hope you can all join us for that. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. And I will see you all soon. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
guys. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you again, Peter. Have a good night.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Have a great night, everybody.
You too,
Thank you.
Julie. Bye. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric.